Of SoundCloud's greatest icons are brought to the Weekyard Hotel in America somewhere to compete in the platform's hottest tournament, Mashup Week. Kesha, Neil Ciceriga, Herobrine, Charles Quad City Barkley, Ray William Johnson, Metaton EX, Snail Chan, Flat Eric, Billie Eilish, Dio Brando, Lord Farquaad, Filthy Frank, Geico Gaming, Scott the Woz, Hat Kid, and Heavy Weapons Guy. Round 1 of this single elimination tournament passes without incident. Dio loses to Farquaad, Herobrine loses to Ray, Kesha loses to Geico Gaming, Barkley loses to Neil, Billy loses to Scott. Long story short, Billy created a living chair as a child, and that chair is both on SoundCloud and fucking pissed that she lost. While Assault is mostly contained to comments on tracks afterward, an ominous message was included within a glitched up track, No-Eyed Senorita's description. The bracket continued as normal despite the interruption. Heavy beats Metaton, Hat Kid beats Snail Chan, and Frank beats Eric. Something seems to have happened to the losers though. While tracks of them were still uploaded, the thumbnails turned grayscale. There was no explanation offered for this quite yet, but some of these solos showed visual anomalies and edits to the descriptions as the winners bracket raged on. Speaking of which, the quarter... sorry.
They're called quarterfinals.
Shut up, incel!
It's Chair.
Chair obtains full access to the Mashup Week account and issues a threat to the contestants, introducing their epic legion of bosses to take the roster down. Scatman and Hatman, Tony Stark, Spinell, and Omega Soundclown. Scatman, Hatman, Tony, and Spinell are all employed as mercenaries paid by Chair, whereas Omega Soundclown was created by Chair and considers them their parent. Scatman and Hatman go first, losing handily to Farquaad and Ray. With them out of the way, Farquaad is able to beat Ray and advance to the semi-finals. Tony's next, trying in vain to stop Neil and Geico Gaming's match from going ahead. And perhaps he was right too, because Mashup Week was still using straw poll for voting at the time, a platform severely lacking in protection against rigging. Both sides took part in the mess around this match, and while Geico was declared the winners, it's a mystery for the ages who would have won this match legitimately. Neil didn't seem to take it very well. At the very least, this was the push necessary to get voting off straw poll and onto Google Forms, making for more reliable results moving forward. If rigging couldn't stop the bracket, Spinell had little hope of it, finding herself defeated by Scott and Heavy. Heavy beat Scott after this, which is kind of a shame. A round 2 loss doesn't feel right for Scott in particular now, does it? Before the final match of the quarterfinals, the first Mashup Week Direct was released. Among other things, it announced Garfield is in cahoots with Chair and the Losers Bracket, hosted by Chair.
I hear that there's been a lot of discourse about the format behind the scenes, so I hope this satisfies no one.
Mashup Week wasn't a single elimination, but double. Scott gets a second chance, and everyone else too, I guess. However, the two who'll lose in the semi-finals fall straight out of bracket. Omega Soundclown is thrashed by Filthy Frank and Hat Kid, who summarily thrashes Frank in the bracket in turn. At this point, the winners' semi-finals are set to start and the losers are no longer in grayscale. They've been given new alternate designs for the losers' bracket. Chair's next set of bosses bust their way into the bracket too. KDA Akali. And Susie! Akali is run over by Geico, who beat Farquaad just as easily afterward, and Susie is taken down by Hat Kid and Heavy, who bond through the experience. As Hat Kid loses to Heavy, she offers him her hat as a token of friendship. With the winners finalists decided, it's time to finally move into the losers bracket, and the Jammin. All assault from Chair had to go somewhere, and it collected in a pocket dimension beneath the hotel, where the losers also wound up. Those from the first round got away from the amplified emotions contained there with nothing more than a costume change, but the quarterfinalists, they weren't so lucky. The intense negative emotions in the Jammin corrupted Frank, Scott, Neil, and Ray into glitched out versions of themselves known as off-keys. Their personalities distorted into their worst selves. Rather than Chair sending bosses after the contestants, They now have to fight their own off-key friends to save them from themselves. Yeah, all 4 off-keys were internet comedians, ain't that something? Dio and Herobrine beat the shit out of a very pink Frank, who's dragged off to Dr. Doofenshmirtz and Dr. Amigo to get cured. With that out of the way, Herobrine knocks Dio out of the bracket and continues on. A werewolf Kesha and Barkley, with his soul trapped in his basketball, whoops Scott's ass, who is cured shortly afterwards. Barkley beats Kesha, and I'm running out of interesting ways to describe match results. Neil's the next off-key to need some sense knocked into him, and after one of the best solo track drops of the entire tournament, Billy and Metaton manage to stop him long enough to get into the Doctors. This match happens during Billy's real-life 18th birthday, so it's no surprise she won, putting Metaton out of the competition. Next up, Ray is assaulted by a puppet and a small child, is hospitalized, and makes a full recovery. The last of the first round losers turns out to be Eric, and Snail-chan moves on. Losers round 2 didn't have bosses, or a bracket track at first, leaving some breathing room for the characters to interact. Spinel was never in it for the payment, only for companionship, and with her role as a boss over, she reconciles with Scott and Heavy and they become friends. Hackett and Farquaad, meanwhile, turn out to be lost in an entirely separate part of the dimension, far, far away from the losers bracket. Oh, hey, Garfield has a solo track now. Why does he have songs related to demons? Cured of his corruption, Neil takes a trip over to the Gaylord Hotel to be a phantom thief for a while, along with another Hat Kid? Must have been multiplayer mode. Back to losers round 2, though. In a surprise upset, Frank is beaten by Herobrine, and in a less surprising turn of events, Scott stops Barkley with the highest percentage of votes in the entire tournament. Billy was beaten by a white guy with glasses in winners, and the theme continues in losers as she loses to Neil after the first live cover of a Mashup Week track was released. And Ray loses to Snail-chan, who
I got muscle like Superman trainer.
Happens to run into Hat Kid after her match. Sure, she may look weird and shadowy and talk weird and should be in a completely different part of the dimension, but I'm sure she's fine. Meanwhile, the ghost of Lord Farquaad interrupts Heavy and Barkley's chess game. Where the fuck did he come from? Loser semi-finals have arrived, and so have the next set of bosses. Commander Tata, Gigi Scoops... Or is it Baba Scoops now? And Garfield, lying in wait for the finalists. Scott and Herobrine beat Tata, then Scott beats Herobrine. Neil and Snail-chan beat Gigi Scoops, then after an account change, Neil beats Snail-chan. Cher and Garfield meet in an Olive Garden to talk business, narrated by a very handsome and charismatic and smart-sounding voice who doesn't at all sound like someone who belongs in an Olive Garden, and their agreement seems a little strained. Time for losers finals. Scott and Neil made it out alive. Garfield's gone. I'm sure that's the last they'll see of him. With that out of the way, the one moving on to the grand finals was decided. Scott gets out of the dimension pretty easily, but it seems Neil needs a bit of help from an unidentified interloper. Besides that, it's back to relaxation for everyone. Spinel and Tony have an exhibition match, which Tony wins. Heavy and Cactus Team witness an appearance of Green Sands, a mysterious cryptid-like entity from Green Undertale. He is the only one. Frank takes a crack at drink mixing, and Cher can't seem to corrupt the thumbnails involving Farquaad and Hat Kid. Speaking of which, both of them are apparently still lost despite Hat Kid's earlier return. They stumble into a normal suburban home and a normal suburban dungeon underneath, where the grand finals can't start quite yet as Cher decides to finally try and take out the finalists themselves. The fight ends in a stalemate as no matter how hard the finalists try, they can't even land a scratch on the chair. Someone can, though.
You fools! None of you can even lay a scratch. What?
Alright, clowns. Show's over.
Garfield returns, killing Cher and asserting himself as the true final boss. He explains that he was drawn to the gathering of so many universes in one place, and that he created the dimension to trap the contestants. However, Cher's magic rage at Billy's loss at the start of the tourney distorted it, and gave it the off-keying effects we know of today. He mind-controlled Hatkid and Farquaad and sent them back to the Weak Yard, hence Hatkid's odd behaviour earlier. Like the off-keys, the rest of the cast have to fight their friends to free them from the corruption. Hatkid and Farquaad aren't the only ones Garfield hijacks though. He takes control of the remaining bosses next, pitting them against the contestants once more. After a hard-fought battle, they too are freed, and with everyone already gathered in one place, they finally take down the towering monstrosity that Garfield revealed himself to be. As an ageless cosmic nightmare, Garfield isn't capable of death, but the combined power of the contestants and bosses are enough to seal him away in a phone which John Arbuckle pops by to pick up. With that out of the way, Draculof and Eustace can finally face off against Robert to decide... Wait, what? Who the fuck? There's nowhere else this will fit, so let me get this out of the way. Robert died, leaving a single tree sapling in his place. Eustace returned to the middle of nowhere with Draculof, and eventually Draculof fell into the back rooms sometime afterward. None of them will reappear in MEGAMIX. Moving on. With that out of the way, Heavy and Geico can finally face off against Scott to decide Mashup Week's winner. And if you're watching this, you probably already know how this goes.
Hey y'all, Scott here.
We may have our winner, but things aren't over quite yet. As the cast prepare to leave, Neil and Doof work on something in the background. The Lifetime Achievement Machine. Even if they menaced them in the past, they simply couldn't leave Cher dead and buried. The wooden scraps are loaded in, and out comes... Cece. Though unused to a human form, she's generally a lot happier like this. Despite everything everyone's been through, it's all pretty much okay in the end. The grand finalists visit the inventory and plan to go on a cruise, and the rest of the characters return home and eagerly await the sequel tournament, Mashup Week MEGAMIX. Stay jammin'!
And they all lived mashily ever masher. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. And bracket starts in 4 days.
Final results. Congratulations. Thank you for everything.
Well, wasn't that insightful? Feels like yesterday you were out there causing trouble, spreading your evil influence. Glad that's all over. Ha! Right, Garfield?
Yeah, read my mind like a thought bubble.
You know, we could heat up some lasagna. If you're interested, I mean. I could add extra meat just the way you like it. We'd need to figure out how phones digest food, but I'm sure we can figure something out. What do you say, Garfield?
Took you long enough, John.